community that we call the Dama Boots. Welcome back, Dama Boots. Welcome in. So today, being Halloween, we are going to be discussing a theme which is probably going to get me haunted for the rest of my life. Probably not. Maybe. I don't know. If I'm really lucky, maybe not. And that is, Halloween is essentially, depending on which source you go with, a way to remember one's lost loved ones, right? These are the spirits coming back and us giving them some kind of small sacrifice to make sure that they don't do terrible things, right? In its most basic form, right? Obviously there's more to it than that. But we have something fairly similar to that in the Buddhist world that we usually celebrate in July. Don't ask me why, we just do. And the source that we're going to be going off of is Ullambana Sutra, or the Ullambana Sutra, right? Which is very much an apocryphal Chinese text that did not exist in the Buddhist time at all, not even close. And it's really based around the concept of filial piety and how Buddhism, when it evolved and adapted to new cultures, kind of adapted itself, right? So as Buddhism went into China, filial piety was a thing. That was the thing, right? That's a huge part of the Confucian ethic, all right? You are loyal to your parents. You have a certain respect and veneration and reverence for your parents, for those who came before you in your family line, right? This is, ironically enough, also why Buddhism in China became vegetarian, right? Buddhism in Asia, Buddhism in India in its original form, the Buddha and his monks were very strictly, you eat whatever is put in your alms bowl, right? So they go on alms rounds every day, and whatever the community put in their bowl, that's what they ate, right? The trade-off was they gave Dharma to the community, and the community gave them basically nourishment, kept them going. It worked out great, right? But in China, with filial piety, if you're going around begging, if you're going around on alms rounds, you're disgracing your family. Can't do that. So Buddhism had to adapt. And when Buddhism adapted, well, if you're going to have to grow stuff, if you're going to have to grow your own food and do your own work, right? And you can't do this, go on the alms rounds, well, you're going to have to grow veggies, right? Because you can't kill animals. That's the first precept, right? You can't take life. Or you have to refrain from taking life, depending on how you translate that specific phrase. So, Buddhism became vegetarian, but one of the other adaptations that Buddhism took into what became Chinese Buddhism was also related to this filial piety, and that was the sense that your ancestors weren't just gone, right? That they were somehow in various realms of rebirth, and they could come back from time to time, right? So every year, the 15th day of the 7th month, the 7th lunar month, which is usually July, or which we usually celebrate in July, sometimes August, because it's weird like that. It is thought, especially in the Chinese diaspora, Chinese cultural sphere, so everywhere that China touched, really, China, Vietnam, a little bit in Laos, not too much in Laos, but a little bit, Korea, Japan, and all of the Buddhisms that formed in those countries, this became a thing, right? So you were going to respect your ancestors, the spirits were going to come back, right? And they always did so on what became known as the Ghost Festival, right? In Japan, this is known as Ubon, right? Or Obon, sorry. Brain's not working right. So this is Obon or Ullambana, right? The Ghost Festival, the Ullambana Festival, right? Where your ancestors come back and you get to offer merit to help them into their next rebirth so that it's a better rebirth, right? Good times, right? So that was Buddhism's adaptation into China. Now we have this here in America. We have Halloween, right? Which is like I mentioned, kind of the similar thing. So, what I thought we should talk about today, based on this, is this kind of like Ullambana Halloween connection. But before I do that, I do have to kind of explain what the Ullambana Sutra talks about, right? So, where it comes from. Essentially, it is a conversation between the Buddha and one of his chief disciples who was really well versed in the so-called spiritual powers, right? This is Moggallana, who was able to transfer himself between realms, between these different realms of rebirth to find people, right? To just go and help them. And so one time he was in meditation and he decided he was going to find his mother, who had passed. And he went and he found her, and she was in one of the hell realms, suffering. And this kind of upset him a little bit, right? Because you don't want your mom to be in hell. That's a bad time. So he goes back to the Buddha and he's like, okay, well, what's going on here? And the Buddha said, using his own spiritual powers, said, okay, she's there because at one point she was a really terrible human being, right? And she would do all of this terrible stuff, like specifically torture animals, this, that, and the other thing. So how you fix that is by offering merit, by doing things specifically on her behalf, because that will reach her. That will kind of lessen her spell there, and she will be reborn into a different realm, right? Because in Buddhism, none of these rebirths are permanent, right? You can be reborn into the heavens. It's a long time there. You'll spend a long time in all kinds of good stuff, but eventually that ends. Those who are really terrible human beings will spend a lot of time in hell. It'll eventually end too, once they've burned off all of the causes that brought them there, right? So you can think of like an individual like Pol Pot in Cambodia, who murdered essentially 2 million people, or had 2 million people murdered on his orders, right? He's going to spend a lot of time in hell, guaranteed. Eventually, though, once he has worked off all of the consequences of killing 2 million people, which, don't get me wrong, it'll be a very long time, he will be reborn into some other realm, right? Probably not a human realm, but main point of that is there's these different realms, and you can be reborn into them. You can, and if your relatives are, according to this Chinese apocryphal scripture, this Chinese apocryphal sutra, with the right merit, your family, your relatives can in fact be reborn into different, better realms, right? So if they're suffering now, maybe they won't be in that next rebirth. Maybe they'll end up somewhere else. Maybe they'll end up in the Deva realm. Who knows, right? But the main realm that we need to be focusing on, especially with the Ghost Festival, is the realm of the hungry ghosts, right? This is the realm in Buddhism that, if you take it literally, is a terrible place to be. If you take it as metaphor, it's also a terrible place to be, but you have a chance to avoid it, right? So the hungry ghost realm is essentially this realm where people who have been exceptionally greedy, who have given in to the temptation to gather stuff, gather belongings, gather cash, gather money, right? Get rich, have given into that greed, that's where they go. And when they go there, they end up with these giant bellies, and you can look up the hungry ghosts online. The pictures are awesome. I definitely recommend it, just for the pure sight of it alone, right? These put our little ghosts and ghouls and goblins who pass by here to shame. So they've got these giant bellies, right? How do you fill a giant belly? Well, not with their mouths, you don't, right? Because they have these tiny little mouths that are only able to take in 1 grain of rice or 1 drop of water at a time. So they are never, never, never satiated, right? This is what happens when you're terribly greedy, right? You get the results of your greed, right? It follows you. So, what do you do to get someone out of that realm, right? What do you do to help a relative who maybe was a little too greedy and, just ended up there? Well, if you're an ancient if you're part of this ancient Chinese culture and you have this apocryphal Chinese scripture, the Ullambana Sutra, you look at it and you say, okay, well, I make offerings, specifically offerings of food. So a lot of times you'll see on Chinese altars, you'll see, or in Japanese as well, you'll see fruit, you'll see, that kind of stuff. In olden days, it was really, sweets were the thing because sugar devolves real fast, right? So sugar is real hard to come by. So sweets would have been exceptionally expensive. Now, obviously, you go to the store, you go to the commissary, you find bags and bags and bags of it. It's just all over the place, and it's super cheap. But back then, it was super expensive. So you put sweets on the altar, offer them to monks, and say, okay, this is I'm offering this out of generosity, right? Because generosity is the counter to greed, right? So you do a generosity offering, right? You are generous. The merit of that action can help, according to the sutra, can help those who have made their way to the hungry ghost realm, right? Those who are suffering through their own greed. Your generosity can affect people way beyond you, is what this is getting at, right? So, as we celebrate Halloween, and as all of the sugar flies all over the place, keep that in mind, right? Even the simplest act of generosity can have a meaningful impact. And that, all parts of Buddhism endorse, right? A little bit of generosity here and there is not a bad thing. A lot of generosity is a good thing, right? Being generous, being aware as you're offering things to others, as you're being a kind, generous person, right? That has merit, that has value, that has meaning. And that's what we should be essentially doing according to this. Well, according to really all of Buddhism, right? Generosity is across the board. So we can really say that according to the Buddha, generosity has merit, generosity has meaning, and we should really be practicing that, right? Even if it's in little ways. I can go back to other Buddhist scriptures which say even a handful of rice flour offered by a child is of merit, is of value, right? Because it sets in motion that generosity. It sets in motion the good conditions and the good causes or the good results of that action, which further generate good results in other actions, right? You, by doing even something tiny, even a little bit of generous things, right? Even the smallest of generous things can impact and can change things around you. So that's what the Buddha is saying. I say we practice it. Cool. Okay, and with that, I'm going to close out the sermon. Dhamma Boots. We'll see you next time.